This conference will now be recorded.
So we're gonna do attendance. If everyone could say their name, just clear for the camera, video. So
Roger Peterson,
Jay Wolf,
Dan Casey,
Rich Shepard,
Kent Drusella,
Larry Broody. Me too. Don Monroe, Coastal.
no, that's good.
Croft. John Rendon, Hubberman.
All right. So that takes attendance. And so we're gonna did we have a minute to review the minutes?
So, Mr. Chairman, can I just make one?
Yeah.
Quote? So this is for the benefit of our new board secretary, our previous board secretary, Aaron, is no longer with us. She decided to step aside because she had other things going on. So our new board secretary is Judy. Judy, I'm going to forget your last name. But anyways, this will be her first session with us. So she'll do similar. We'll record the meetings and then she'll, off of the recordings, draft the minutes for us and move forward with that. So I say that only to welcome her and also to make you guys know she doesn't know any of us yet. So when you speak, just make sure you're clear on who you are so she can get the minutes right. So thanks. That's all.
Perfect. All right. So yeah, we get to look at the minutes that were just revised just to confirm everything. If everyone's happy with them or any comments, you want to approve them?
I've reviewed them for my part in this. I think they look fine. So I think they're accurate from my point of view. That's John Hubber.
I'll move that we approve the minutes as shown on February 18th, 15th.
The minutes of January 18th, yes. We got a second?
Second. I'll second.
Oh, Larry.
Larry.
All right.
And Kent made the addition look.
Yes, absolutely. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. So nothing on the consent agenda, nothing new. Oh, nothing for the open forum. Financial report?
Okay, so I didn't make copies, but I think most of you have seen it or can pull it up. We had a good month of January when you compare to the previous January, and again, you tired of hearing me say it a lot has to do with the timing of permit renewals. But our monthly total was 151,000 compared to 80,000 this time last year for the month, the January of FY23, this January compared to last January of FY22. And a big part of that was the visitor dockage. We talked about it. So visitor dockage, we just now started taking visitor dockage requests. And so they're coming in hot and heavy, and we're making them as we're able to. And then of course seasonal dockage also was a pretty good number. And again, it's timing. So, but we're tracking. If you look at how we are tracking for year to date, we're pretty much right at what we were last year to date. And I think that's a real good thing because it doesn't include the sale of sand like last year did, and so our numbers are going to be strong, you know. So, anyways, if there's any questions, I can answer.
Anyone? No? All right. New business? None? Old business. You're up.
Really old. It's like
Yeah,
getting
boy.
old.
Yes.
That keeps on giving.
Let's see, what's the best way, like from right here?
I mean, I don't know if I don't think the camera needs it, just needs our discussion about it, so.
Okay.
Um,
We'll start here, and if that doesn't work, then we can move, but
So I have a couple of copies if anybody wants. I'm sure those who, anybody want a big copy so you can follow? or-
burn in my brain.
yeah, I'm familiar with
You're
it.
both familiar, so
Getting rid of now.
this is the Anino property that everybody knows about at Mill Point. And what we did was, based on the last meeting with you folks, is we completely took away and abolished the sandcastle idea, mainly because of the harbor master's concern about it being a structural component in potential navigable waters. We still need to demonstrate to the commission the mitigation for shellfish, as well as, from our perspective, with the salt marsh that's there, maybe incorporate something that we're presenting tonight that will do two things. One will protect the edge of the salt marsh that is over time showing signs of degradation, and also meet the shellfish mitigation component of the project. And in discussing everything with Heinz, I know the commission has been looking to us for more than what is sometimes required. In this instance, because we came to Waterways and got basically an approval for a dock and dredging, we've been pushed by the commission to come up with more elaborate type of shellfish mitigation. So what we did was we looked at Chesapeake Bay, where they're doing some things like shellfish bags along the salt marsh to make them stay in more of one location to do a dual purpose. And in that location in Chesapeake Bay and many of the areas, they're using them to protect salt marsh. So we said, well, that would be a good thing here, because it would help us do two things: meet the mitigation, more site specific, and also protect the salt marsh, but also addressing John's concern that the previous sandcastles being closer or further away from the salt marsh being a structural component. These are going to be biodegradable bags. In discussing it with Heinz, we'll use a lower grade coir netting to put the shellfish in. They'll degrade over time. The shellfish will stay behind in a specific location against the salt marsh in an attempt to protect the edge of the salt marsh, but also meet the mitigation for shellfish and meet the request of John to, eliminate any navigable hazard, potential navigable hazard. They are going to be anchored with helical anchors. They make a helical anchor that's designed for this. They usually use them for Coast Guard buoys. We'll make sure that those are 6 to 8 inches below grade, and then we'll attach the bags as best as we can so they stay stable during the quieter months, and then during the winter as they degrade, we're going to just rely on the shellfish adhering to one another and hopefully protect the salt marsh. And I say hopefully because this is not done around here typically. The ones in the Bay Area that they were doing, they do show that they last, and that the salt marsh ends up growing in and around the actual shellfish, because they're basically be oysters. They kind of stay in place. So that's why we're back here, because any change that we have to make to a plan that the waterways already approved, we have to kind of come back to you. And so that's why we're back here. So this is an aerial view of it, and this is the plan view. You can see that they're one. I'll get back here so I can see too. They're right along the salt marsh here. You can see the end of the dock. We're landward of the dock, and so we're really out of quote navigable waters, but we're still in intertidal because they'll be right along the salt marsh. They're 1 by 2 feet by 3 feet, and we have John accounted them there. There's about, I forgot the number, I didn't write it down. It's not as many as I said before.
About 45.
Yeah, it's not. It's under way under the number I said. But they're they're very low profile, meaning that the 1 foot is in the vertical direction, and they'll be tucked right into the salt marsh as best as we can. So it really is out of the navigable water and is in their environment basically, because that's kind of where they hang out anyway. So that's where we're at.
All right. I mean, I think, yeah, your question?
So how come for everything else that's ever been approved, or since I've been around for the last couple of years, that the mitigation that Heinz has put forth and proposed and has proven to be successful, why are they making these people recreate the wheel? Yeah, I mean, is that a stupid question?
No, it's a great question. It's an excellent question, because as engineers and as presenters, this is something out of the norm. And to get a direct answer is really difficult because they take each project as it is. And I think the dredging component of this project is kind of driving additional in-water mitigation as opposed to just the shellfish and the upland mitigation for the dock crossing over the salt marsh. So we have two.
But it's 80 cubic yards, right? Or less.
It's less than 100 yards.
Yeah.
But
I mean, am I asking a dumb question?
no,
I
no.
guess I'm just confused why we're even here. You know?
because we have to come back to you with a change.
No, I know. I say that.
So we're trying to comply with two boards, right? You folks have been gracious enough to approve a project that we think should have just had the regular kind of mitigation. But then we have commission members that have different takes on things when we go to conservation, and they see the project with the dredging component, even though it's small in volume, it does cover a pretty good size square footage footprint. So there's already depth there. There's not much more we have to take out to get the depth, but because of the broadness of the area, as soon as they look at that, they say, wow, that looks like a lot. And then when they try to equate, 50 to 80 cubic yards to 300 square feet, they look at the 300 square feet.
It's too dumb.
Right. But the amount of material come out is insignificant, and it's not even going to require a full-blown water quality certification at the state level. But at the local level, because there's some commission members that are very hooked on, how do I say it?
You don't have to. Yeah.
They're definitely hooked on wanting, to see more mitigation, because in their mind, they need it to justify being able to approve it. So that's kind of where we're at with that. But it's a great question. I mean, I know we're going to get it. Well, we got it twice already from you. That's why I'm wearing my hat, though. I'm hoping it gets some brown.
I mean, I think we should hear from that first.
I will certainly go. Heinz Prof Natural Resources. Since it's the only thing beyond the agenda, there's like a short story version, a longer story. I'll give you the longer one. But it's not that much longer, but it's important. And the ultimate conclusion or recommendation by me is the mitigation that's taken place in the past with other projects is my preferred method of mitigating projects like this. There were years, many, many years ago, when projects came before waterways, but then also conservation, that were looked at in terms of their impacts to water quality, perhaps, or shellfish areas. And it was the Conservation Commission that came to me and said, could you put some maps together of the town where there are general shellfish habitat areas, shellfish, historical oysters, scallops, soft-shell clams, so forth. And I did that with just kind of, took the river and did some blobs where I know commercial guys harvested, in which area you could find certain shellfish. And they began to look at that, and they wanted to standardize some sort of mitigation for projects. So they looked at a certain number of shellfish that could offset a typical dock project, and then have the homeowner be responsible to replenish X amount of shellfish. It's been so many years ago, the number was around 30 bushels of whatever it was. And working with Amy Uzowski back then, that was one option. Homeowner would go out and try to contact growers, shellfish, people that had that amount of shellfish that time of year. These are homeowners. They've never dealt in shellfish. So in talking with Amy Uzowski and providing for the conservation of that board, we came up with what is the equivalent of 30 bushels, I think, of that in terms of seed that could be raised in the lab at a cheaper cost and then planted in that area or near that area that was affected. And the cost at that time was in excess of $6,000. I know that because we rounded down, we brought it down. I thought it was maybe 8 or 9, but we thought, okay, maybe a $6,000 amount, and the homeowner could spread it over 3 years if they chose, $2,000 a year that went into an account that Natural Resources, myself, and Amy would have access to. But the only thing that could be drawn on that was shellfish seed or shellfish that was plantable. And that was so long ago, and we've had many projects along the route have that mitigation kind of added on to projects at the conservation level because they're the ones that assess that. This recent one, the oyster castles, the first time it was even brought to my attention was in the form of an application from the engineer and maybe a site visit. So the Conservation Commission, I don't think they have to, but you would think they would at least ask for input or reach out to the Natural Resources Director. It happens to be me, but I didn't think it personally. I just think that you'd say, we're thinking about some other options for mitigation. The ones in the past have worked, in my opinion, clearly, but every project is its own project, so they're looking at something else. Once the oyster castles came up and we brought up those certain things that we thought about those, they've come back now with biodegradable oyster bags that we placed along the shoreline. Rather than just saying no and taking that stance, I would like to compromise if I could in terms of mitigation. But I still come back to why is it happening in the middle of a project? That was a question I would like to ask them on March 1st when I go in front of them. 2, it does set precedents. They may or may not feel that. I think it does, just for the precedence of, well, maybe there's one version of mitigation and maybe something else we come up with along the way with any project, whether it's this or something else that we have yet to encounter. I also think that this could be viewed as an aquaculture project. If there's seed, fill in the blank, oysters, scallops, soft shell clams, mussels, then I think there's certain permitting that may or may not have to come along that route. If someone just came to us out of the blue and said, I'd like to put some biodegradable bags along my shoreline with some juvenile shellfish, not even in regards to a dock, there would be a meeting with harbor master, conservation, myself, and the thought of any permitting that may require. It's happened already with other projects and people trying to do growing of something that it's required a review or the path of going to a permit. I don't know if that's required, but that conservation doesn't see that or maybe not has brought it up. And then the idea of these bags biodegrading is a good thing, but from my opinion, the faster they degrade it, the better. The different types of materials you can use, whether it's kind of a coconut mesh bag or a cellulose bag or polymers. I've read some materials dissolve in about 3 to 6 months, some are 3 to 10 years. So I'd like to see something on the much shorter end in terms of the dissolving of it. And those shellfish that are there in an area that is seasonally approved for shellfishing. Herring River is open generally in the winter and closed in the summer due to water quality. This area, I would think, with bags of shellfish there, probably if it got to that point, have to kind of be off limits until those bags degrade or open up or something like that. So that adds another just factor to be considered when I think about this. So I go right back to my initial conclusion. I would prefer the standard shellfish mitigation that has worked in the past. There's a lot of flexibility with that. But I'm open to discuss these other options as long as those questions are answered that I brought up. Thank you.
Answers in a nutshell.
Yeah, Jay, miss anything?
No. There are questions he's gonna ask the commission that I said, fine, you can ask the commission whatever, because that's not an answer that we can answer. Meaning, why isn't the original type of mitigation enough? I asked the same question. So that would be fair to have him there on March 1st to ask him that, because the commission probably would like to hear, or like to discuss that. As far as the biodegradable bags, where we can use like a 300 to 400 mesh coconut fiber that would meet the 3 to 6 month degradation window. So we can accomplish that. So that kind of answers that. In terms of aquaculture, he's right. You can't, as a homeowner, just say, I want to do something in conservation jurisdiction. So they would have to acquire a permit. And I agree that an approved project can set a precedent, but we've heard, at least over the last 20 years of my career, that the commission does not look at projects down the way and say, and listen to an applicant say, well, you did it over there, how come I can't do it here? They said, it doesn't matter. That's not a precedent setter for us. We review each project in and of itself. So it may play into someone litigating, feeling that they're treated unfairly because someone has something, but that goes to court because the commission has a bylaw that forces someone to go to superior court, and that can be hundreds of thousands of dollars of litigation for some shellfish. I can't say that would never happen, but if it does, hats off to the person that can fight that fight and win in the end, because usually in a litigation matter that I've been involved with in the past, even the judge doesn't use precedent set. The judge wants to see that you can make an overriding case that goes against the commission, that you deserve what you're asking for. And that's a tough hurdle to come over. And then you also have to appeal it to DEP. So then that could go through an appeal process. Then the person that may be doing the appeal can push it to an adjudicatory hearing, which Fran's already went through with that shellfish growing operation. Took 3 years and over $150,000 of litigation just to get a shellfish growing operation that is really legitimate. The stuff that we're talking about, I know it could possibly set a precedent, but I'm thinking that because there's relatively few properties left on Herring River, but John makes a good point too, that someone could just come in and say, well, I'd like to just have some shellfish to grow and I can, harvest them myself. And I understand that could be a problem. But then again, it still requires a permit, and an aquaculture permit is no easier to get than, say, a permit like we're going for. It still has to go through, like, we have to go through water quality certification, we have to go through DEP because it's below mean high water, so you have to get a Chapter 91 permit. That's a lot of permitting for something that they might be better off served getting a grant over in an area where they're doing shellfish grants, like in Wellfleet, like in Venice. So Harwich isn't classically a place where they issue.
No, and I think you also mentioned, this hasn't been done. It's not quite a pilot study. I mean, yeah, Chesapeake Bay, it's not just over the bridge, but it would be somewhat new for here.
Definitely.
And so I also have the idea of what's the fewest number of bags that still answers the question thereafter.
Yeah.
Like if it's 45 and we're not really paying, is it maybe 10 or 15?
It can be
20,
square footage. So we can discuss that with the commission if you're okay with it and Waterways is okay with it. And there's a certain square footage that's required. We're trying to work with Amy because of the new regulations. She's of the mind that it's double what it used to be. We don't see that in the language in the new bylaw. So Glenn Wood is reviewing that to see if there's a balance. And then the square footage would be whatever that square footage is. And it isn't necessarily the 45 bags. We just put them along the shoreline in its entirety. So we are open to you bringing that up. And if they are willing to reduce it, we can reduce it. So I'm not sure where we're at.
Yeah, I mean, I think we kind of need some of the answers to these questions, really. I mean,
I have a few things. What kind of line and how long of a line is being used to connect the helical to the bag?
Well,
And what happens to that line?
that's going to have to be like a hempro, biodegradable as well. So that would degrade over time as well, similar to
How
the.
much time?
We can make it so.
Same time as the bags are? Or am I gonna have a bunch of line floating around?
No, we will. Well, two things we'll do. One is we'll go to the manufacturer and make sure that whatever the hemp is made of, that's made, the bag is the same material. So then it would degrade at the same time. Also, in order to avoid if it breaks off because of ice flow or whatever, we're gonna make sure that the commission puts in monitoring of those on a regular basis so that we can monitor whether or not, just like Seth Wilkinson does with his fiber rolls, that an inspection has to be made. If they need to be tightened, then we tighten them. And as they get tightened, they may need to be replaced because they may be degrading faster than we think, than the bags. So we would monitor that so that we don't have lines going out into the waterway. And that can be conditioned. And those monitoring conditions with fiber rules have always worked well because we have to report to Amy on those twice a year. So we would have to do the same thing. It wouldn't be any different. It is, even though the shellfish are hard, it's still a soft kind of solution, really, because they're natural and the bags are biodegradable. So it kind of meets the standard even with, coastal bank protection. It's a soft engineering solution that has to be monitored.
So, okay, thanks for that. I mean, from my perspective, and I think our committee is here from a waterways perspective to look at navigation. And that's really, right, the waterway and particularly any risk to navigation. From my perspective, this proposal, while we may have different views on it, and I 100% refer to Heinz on the whole mitigation plan and what's right, and I have a lot of opinions on the tack that the Conservation Commission is taking in this particular project. From a navigation standpoint, I don't see that what they're proposing poses the navigation concern that we certainly had with 100 concrete blocks in the waterway, similar to what the Oyster Castle project was. So my own opinion, and you guys vote how you want, but my opinion is I think they've addressed the navigation piece in my mind. I don't know what it's going to look like. It may look not, real aesthetically pleasing. Certainly, I think it's going to be better than the oyster castles. And if these things degrade in, 3 to 6 months or whatever, then it's short-lived and hopefully it'll serve its purpose. So I personally don't have, as the harbor master looking at the waterway, I don't necessarily have a concern with what's being proposed. I think what they're requiring the applicant to do is a bit unfair to the applicant, for one. And I think them not referring to our natural resource director who's been here for 25 years and studied our waterways and is the expert not only in Harwich, but on the entire Cape. Why they're not referring to him on what was required from a mitigation standpoint, I think is ludicrous. And I'm saying that because I want to be on tape. I think it's just wrong. And what we have done, as Larry says, has worked according to our natural resource director, and why we're not requiring that same thing for this applicant is beyond me. So that's where I'm at. Thanks.
All right.
I agree with you. But I just hope that doesn't get in the way of a resident of Harwich being able to get what was already approved. And you folks have been really gracious about having us come up with a plan that was the original plan that you were satisfied with. And to go back and forth is really, not to belabor the point, but John's point is well taken.
Well, I mean, the waterways are tough. I mean, you look at all the moorings, you look at all the boats being, and it's tough. And people want docks and floats, and it's a tough battle.
Yeah.
So, I mean, to continue to go back and forth is to have a precedent that's set where they're asked to be done something more than anyone else. Oh, well, so what do we want to do? Does anyone have any questions?
Yeah, to John's point, we should make, this is Jay Welple. To John's point, we should make the applicant blameless in this. He should be coming to us for the final time. He shouldn't have to come back another time. And that whatever we decide to do, it should be final. And he should be out of here from our standpoint in waterway. If there's no harm to the waterway on either plan, then I would suggest that we approve the prior approval, and if it's required by the Conservation Commission, this plan, if it doesn't cause any waterway problems. So the original plan had no waterway problems. This plan has no waterway problems. We should let this man go home and address the issues with the Conservation Commission and let them answer the questions that they're going to be asked. But he, as far as I'm concerned, he's met what I think is waterway.
Well, the reason why we're here is because last month they came up with these oyster castles that were cement blocks essentially, which we weren't in favor of.
Right, but this plan and the prior plan meets.
Correct, but I mean, I so say, the Conservation Committee doesn't fully go with this plan, even though we support it, and then they want to change it and do something else, and we can't take our hand out of that.
Let me fill in on that one, okay, to give you some insight. At the last meeting I went to Conservation, I had to ask for a continuance because we needed to bring this. And I was told in no uncertain terms that be prepared that it's going to have to go to a vote on March 1st, period. It will not continue. So if they decide to deny, we may have to withdraw the whole application. After, I won't even tell you how many dollars we spent. So I'm hopeful that at least if we get buy-in here for waterways and we can work with the Shellfish Constable and as well as Amy, that we can get the commission to approve something, because I think the guy deserves something, because he did have something approved that was a viable project until, I won't say, until we had to go through this mitigation. Over, in my mind, over mitigation.
So just one clarification point, if I can.
Yes, absolutely.
Because I don't want to use the original
I agree.
proposal. So it wasn't the original proposal that we approved, probably the third or fourth iteration, but we have a plan number, and I just want to be careful that everybody understands we approved, and it's not, I'm using even the wrong word, approved. We're recommending approval of
Said plan.
that plan, which was not the original plan, but I get your point, and I just went, I'm splitting hairs, but I just want to make sure. Yeah.
We're not even talking about the plan now, we're just talking about approving the proposed
Mitigation.
Yeah, but that mitigation is on the plan.
Yeah,
Right.
And
So
the
we're gonna-
dock is on.
I got
So the dock is to Jay's point, the dock is the original dock, the dredging's the original dredging, that hasn't changed.
Yeah.
So I understand why he's saying that original. We haven't changed that, so your approval, yes, is sort of the mitigation, but we also need the approval of the dock and the dredging as it was proposed before. So that hasn't changed. So if you approve this plan, you're basically approving that, right? Because you already did. But you're also approving the change, which is the
new mitigation.
Yeah. But you folks aren't the final say, so you'll know, on the mitigation. That's between the Shellfish Constable, Amy, the agent, and the Conservation Commission. And that's why we need to get through here, so we can go there and hopefully get a positive vote on March 1st. Whether we do or not, we think we might, but it won't come without, struggle.
Any other questions? Does anyone want
So the conservation, they don't offer the applicant what they want, they just say, that's not what we don't want. So they say it's no, but they don't come up with or if you do this and this, they don't offer any solution, they just keep saying no.
You kind of hit the nail on the head a little bit.
He's not gonna answer the question.
Correct.
So I guess, if they say no, you kind of say, well, what do you want me to do? You say, give me a solution, then I'll tell you if I'll do it or not. Instead of me kind of running back here 3 times, and you just say no, what do you want me to do? And then I'll say yes.
Yeah. It's a battle. You outlined it well.
So what are we gonna do, guys?
I'll make a motion to approve this plan, what the number is.
This one is C-102.
What do they call it? Oyster bags? Is it?
Yeah, oyster bags.
Biodegradable oyster bags.
So I think you're gonna, to John, to be right on, there's 3 numbers. There's the C-102, which is the plan view, the C-100, which is just the aerial view, and the C-300 is the sections. Those are all the same thing you approved before, but we need it again, so these numbers are gonna reflect that.
Yeah,
This is
what's their new date?
Is there a revision date?
Yeah, let's give you the revision date too. The revision date is 2/7/2023. So you can say C-100, C-103, so I mean 102.
Right, so C1,
100, 300, and 102.
100, 300, 102.
Dated
The 7th.
No, revision dated, February 7th, 2023.
Okay. Well, if we go any further, do we have a second?
Second.
Okay.
Can't control.
So the motion would be to
Approve. Accept
accept
the plans
as presented.
as revised with the
Recommend support. Yep.
the shellfish bags.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries.
We'll be working with you on March 1st.
I'll be there.
Okay, appreciate it. Thanks very much.
No surprise, you guys, the things that I brought up, I'm gonna bring up again at that conservation meeting. And kind of have the tone of, you wouldn't think a conservation meeting is the meeting where you discuss mitigation rules and regulations. Like, that's not the time to do that, apparently, but that's been the only opportunity at this point. But those other comments about just the plan, I'll bring those up.
Thanks, John.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good night. Go Bruins.
Yes.
See you guys.
See you later.
Thank you. Thanks.
Yeah.
So.
Because we need to sign those, actually.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Do you want
We need
another
2
set?
plans.
Yeah, we need, yeah.
So I should give you this set here. Yeah.
Are those the new
Yeah, I
ones
got-
there?
Yep, there's a set right
All
here.
right, we need to get two sets signed. Please.
Keep yours on your boards, and we'll use these.
Okay,
These are current, right?
Yeah.
You haven't changed what you gave me.
2/7/2023. 2/7/2023. So those are those 2 sets. Do you need me to sign it? Just you guys. You'll take one of these with you. So, okay. Oh. Will you do what you usually do, like send something? Yeah. Okay, great, thanks.
Really, I have to.
Good.
Oh, yeah.
No.
So. The minutes are so good, so- Yeah. Am I posting these? I agree with all.
Use this, sign.
Yeah. But who's the authorized posting on?
Minutes recorded. Well, you're posting, I mean, you're gonna say posting. And
Yeah,
we'll
yeah,
just
but
pick
who's
one.
uploads?
I need one copy.
I'll send
Oh.
them. You sign them and date them.
But who's the authorizing posting office? You?
You,
Oh, okay.
John, you're authorizing them.
This is mine.
Yes.
Me?
Take this. Good night.
Okay.
See you guys later.
Take care.
We don't.
Thank you. Yeah, you too.
All right, so we just scan those. and
Yeah,
it's
I'll
about
scan
the
and
watermarks
send them and
off
we'll
and everything
post.
else.
Yeah.
Perfect.
absolutely. Sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah, streamline that a little bit.
Perfect.
All right, so here from the Board of Selectmen. No one's here for that, all right. Monthly report, Harbor Master.
You guys got my monthly report, right?
Yep.
I know you probably, I don't know, anybody read my monthly report? There's nothing, I mean, it was a kind of a 2-month monthly report, because at the end of the year, we do our annual report. So when I do an annual report, I don't do a December report. So I combine the months of December and January into this, but, you know, just plug along. If there's any questions about it, I'll certainly answer them, but we're staying busy. So like,
Change to the Natural Resource Officer.
Yeah, we go back to last summer and early fall, I was complaining, we're pointing out that our water levels were really low in our waterways, but into December and certainly in the month of January, our water levels are up and are connecting, waters between Seymour and Hinckley's and Long Pond and Hinckley's and Skidegate Pond. It's good to see that because we're about a month away, March 20th and 21st, is when the AmeriCorps will help me clear out whatever obstructions and debris. Knock on wood, if we have it. We haven't had a terrible storm this winter, creating, down limbs of trees. Yes, there's stuff to remove, but I'm not looking at, any big sequoias or anything that I'm thinking would take a full day to handle just one location. So water levels are up. You've had a mild winter. Yeah, it's only February 15th. It could change, but if this continues at this pace, I could see herring showing up mid-March instead of April 1st. If this kind of water temperature, air temperature, and water levels are there, because they will come in on flow as well, flow of water and water which they respond. Usually fisheries will put the electronic counter back in up at the reservoir, so we get an electronic count, which is important. That'll go in. You put that in mid-March, so that's still on track. And shellfishing's been a little bit busier too. When you have mild weather, this time of year, January, February, March, if it's warmer than 30 degrees, every day of the week is open. The reason that's done like that is because typically winters, you don't have as much light, so you have less tides, and you've got snowstorm, and you had that 2 Saturdays ago when it was bitterly cold. You have a few more of those kinds of days, but it's been mild. There are people around Cove, Pleasant Bay, Witchmere Harbor shellfishing, and getting, maybe not quite limits, but they're happy coming out, especially because they, are out there in 40 degrees instead of Indiana. So that's the report from Natural Resources.
Fantastic.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Does the fishery department, do they stock any in Harwich, stock any funds?
With fish, finfish, or not that I know
Okay.
of. Maybe someone else remembers. Oh, why, I thought Long Pond had something done, not consistently, but.
Years ago.
Smallmouth bass in there and
Chatham, they do the one right past
Chatham?
the corner store on the right.
Yeah, I know, I think she's fun.
Yeah, what is that? Goose Pond? The
Yeah,
Goose
the
Pond?
Pond, yeah. They
do you know what kind of fish went in there? Trout or bass? Or?
Probably a little trout.
I know the answer is no for shellfish and finfish. Why I can't recall.
Right, those are curious, but
All right. No correspondence? Anything else? Make a motion to adjourn?
Next meeting is March 15th.
Yes.
The Ides of March.
Make a motion to adjourn?
motion to adjourn, Kent Rousseau.
Second. Okay, well,
Meeting's adjourned.
Well run.
Gotta get.